The host wasted no time, leaning in with a mischievous grin. "Keanu," he began, "we all know you're the kind of guy who loves to keep a low profile, but let's face it, you're a superstar. You're in these huge movies, you're adored by millions. Don't you just secretly love the fame, the recognition?" Keanu chuckled lightly, his calm demeanor unwavering. "It's not really about that for me," he replied, brushing off the host's jab with ease. But the host wasn't letting up that easily. "Oh, come on, Keanu. You don't get to be a Hollywood legend without enjoying a bit of the spotlight. I mean, John Wick, The Matrix, those are huge films. You can't tell me you don't love all the attention, the premieres, the fans screaming your name." The host's voice had a mocking undertone, as if trying to push Keanu into saying something controversial or dramatic. The audience, sensing the tension, watched closely, their eyes darting between the two. Keanu, however, remained unfazed, his cool, collected persona unshaken. "Look, I appreciate my fans. I'm grateful for my career," Keanu began, his voice steady. "But fame, it's never been the point for me. I do what I do because I love it. I love telling stories. I love the work. The recognition, the red carpets, all of that is secondary. I've seen too many people get caught up in all that, and it doesn't bring happiness in the end." The host raised an eyebrow, clearly not expecting such an honest answer. "But don't you think with all your success there must be a little part of you that thrives on the spotlight? It must be nice to have that power, to have all these people admiring you. Doesn't that feel good?" The question was pointed, but Keanu's calmness only grew in intensity. He looked the host in the eyes, pausing for a brief moment before responding. "I think it's important to understand that fame is fleeting. What stays is the impact you have on others. If you're not making a positive difference, if you're not helping people along the way, what's the point?" The room fell silent, the gravity of Keanu's words sinking in. The host, taken aback by the response, momentarily lost his playful demeanor. The audience, too, was in awe of how Keanu had deflected the host's sarcasm with such grace. Keanu continued, "I've had the opportunity to meet some incredible people along the way, and a lot of them aren't famous. They're just real, good people. That's what I admire. That's what matters." At this point, the audience was in full support of Keanu. They weren't just hearing an actor speak, they were hearing someone who had taken a deep, meaningful look at life and realized that the superficiality of fame was not something to chase after. The host, who had made a career out of pushing celebrities into uncomfortable conversations, now seemed to be realizing that he had met his match. Trying to regain control, the host pushed once more. Okay, we get it. But what about all those people who worship you, Keanu? You've become this hero to millions. Don't you feel that responsibility to live up to that image?" Keanu shrugged slightly, his humility shining through. "I think the best thing I can do is be authentic. I don't want to be a hero. I just want to be a decent person. And if people look to me for inspiration, that's wonderful. But it's not something I set out to do. I'm just trying to live a good life, be kind, and do the best I can." The host, now visibly speechless, had no snappy comeback. He had been expecting Keanu to play into the fame game, to talk about the allure of being adored by millions. Instead, Keanu had flipped the script, showing that there was more to him than just his on-screen persona. He was a man who had a profound understanding of the world, of what really mattered, and that was what made him truly special. For the rest of the interview, the tone had shifted. The playful jabs had stopped, and the conversation moved towards more meaningful topics: Keanu's upcoming projects, his thoughts on life and purpose, and his own personal journey. The audience, who had been expecting a typical late-night show banter, was now witnessing something far more captivating. A glimpse into the heart of a man who had mastered the art of staying grounded, no matter how high the stakes. When the interview ended, the host, now clearly humbled, turned to Keanu and said, "You know, Keanu, you've given me a lot to think about. I didn't expect this conversation to go in this direction. Thank you for your honesty." Keanu nodded, smiling softly. "It's my pleasure. We all have the power to make the world better, no matter how small the actions may seem." As Keanu stood up to leave, The audience erupted in applause. What had started as a potentially awkward moment had turned into an unforgettable lesson on humility, authenticity, and the true value of life. The episode quickly became one of the most talked-about segments in late-night television history. Keanu Reeves had once again proven that there was more to him than just his roles in iconic movies. In that moment, he showed the world that true greatness doesn't come from fame or wealth. It comes from the character and the way we choose to live our lives. And for those who tuned in that night, it was a reminder that sometimes the most powerful statements are the quietest ones. The atmosphere in the studio grew tense. The audience, anticipating Keanu's response, could almost feel the discomfort in the air. The host's words were sharp, intended to unsettle the actor, but Keanu, ever composed, didn't flinch. Instead, he took a moment, his eyes steady, looking directly at the host with a calmness that only Keanu Reeves could master. With a subtle sigh, he leaned forward and responded, his voice steady and measured. "I've never been interested in fame or wealth for the sake of it," Keanu began, his words deliberate. "To me, it's about using the platform I have to make a positive impact, to bring joy and sometimes even hope to others." He paused, letting his words sink in. What people don't realize is that there's a lot more to life than the things we chase after. Success, status, material possessions. These things, in the end, don't really fill us up. It's the connections, the genuine relationships, and doing something meaningful that brings true fulfillment. The studio fell silent for a moment, the audience clearly taken aback by the sincerity in his voice. This wasn't the typical Hollywood response. It wasn't rehearsed or scripted. It was real, and that authenticity resonated deeply with everyone in the room. The host, sensing that his attempt to rattle Keanu hadn't succeeded as planned, shifted slightly in his chair. The sarcasm had faded from his tone as he continued. "But Keanu, you're one of the most recognizable faces in the world. You've had the fame, the movies, and yet you still choose to live a relatively private life. What drives that decision?" Keanu looked thoughtful for a moment before answering. "I'm not against fame, but I don't seek it for its own sake," he said, his voice soft but clear. "I believe in focusing on the work itself, not the accolades. It's the work that matters. And when people recognize me, it's nice, but it's not the reason I do what I do." The host seemed to soften slightly, realizing that his usual approach wasn't going to crack Keanu's cool exterior. "You mentioned making a positive impact. Does that tie into your beliefs? I know you've spoken in the past about your views on life, purpose, and spirituality. Can you share more about that?" Keanu nodded, his gaze shifting slightly as he prepared to share something deeply personal. "I've always believed that we're here to learn, to grow, and to help others along the way. And I believe that it's important to listen, to not just speak, but to truly listen to what others have to say. Life is about compassion and understanding. If we all focused more on that, I think the world would be a better place." The audience, who had been quiet up until this point, suddenly responded with a wave of applause. Keanu's words were hitting home, and it was clear that his humility and depth were resonating with everyone. The host, now somewhat taken aback by the sincerity in Keanu's words, nodded in acknowledgement. "You've definitely given us something to think about, Keanu. But here's a question that many people are dying to know. You're famously private, so I have to ask, what's something about you that the world doesn't know?" Keanu smiled, a rare, slightly mischievous glint in his eye. "Well," he said, "I've spent years quietly working on things that matter to me, like my charity work and supporting various causes. But the real secret? I'm just a guy who loves motorcycles and books. That's about as much of a secret as I'll give you." The crowd laughed, and the host leaned back in his chair, a smile spreading across his face. "Keanu, you're truly a man of mystery, and a man of substance." For the rest of the interview, the atmosphere had shifted. What had started as a sharp, somewhat provocative encounter had transformed into a genuine and heartfelt discussion about life, purpose, and the power of being authentic. Keanu Reeves had once again demonstrated that despite the fame and fortune that surrounded him, he remained grounded in the values that truly mattered: kindness, humility, and making a positive impact on the world. As the interview wrapped up, the host thanked Keanu for his honesty, and the audience erupted into applause. Keanu stood, giving a polite wave before exiting the stage with the same calm grace that he had shown throughout the conversation. The host, still taken aback by the depth of their exchange, watched Keanu leave, clearly reflecting on the wisdom he had just been offered. For Keanu Reeves, the night had been just another reminder of the importance of staying true to oneself, and of the power of using one's platform not for personal gain, but to inspire and uplift others. Keanu's calm yet firm reply hung in the air, leaving a quiet tension that was almost palpable. The host, clearly surprised by the depth of Keanu's response, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His usual sharp wit and quick comebacks were nowhere to be found. For the first time in a long while, the host seemed to be caught off guard by the man sitting across from him. Keanu leaned back slightly, never breaking eye contact with the host, as if waiting for him to process what had just been said. The audience, too, was quiet, hanging on to every word, unsure of where the conversation would go next. Keanu wasn't the typical celebrity on the talk show circuit, and it was becoming abundantly clear that this interview was not going to follow the usual script. "Look," Keanu continued, his voice calm but still carrying a certain weight. "The truth is, I don't need to be adored or recognized by everyone. What I want is to make meaningful connections with people and to leave behind a body of work that speaks for itself. At the end of the day, it's not about how many people know your name or how many awards you have. It's about how you treat others, how you show up for the people in your life, and how you live your truth." There was a pause. The host, now visibly at a loss for words, shifted awkwardly in his seat as though trying to collect his thoughts. Keanu had just turned what was supposed to be a light-hearted interview into a deep and thought-provoking conversation about humility, purpose, and the human experience. The audience, who had been expecting the usual back-and-forth banter, were now glued to their seats, captivated by the unexpected depth of Keanu's response. Keanu's demeanor remained steady, almost serene, as if the calmness was not something he had to perform, but something intrinsic to who he was. The host, still trying to recover, tried to steer the conversation back to lighter ground. All right, Keanu. But seriously, don't you ever get frustrated with all the media attention? You're one of the most famous faces in Hollywood. There must be times when you just want to break free of it all." Keanu gave a soft chuckle, but it wasn't the kind of laughter that matched the usual sarcasm of the talk show environment. Instead, it was genuine, understanding. "Sure, there are moments when I need space, just like anyone else," Keanu admitted. "But I try to remember that this is just one part of my life. Fame doesn't define who I am. It's the moments I share with people, the experiences I've had with those I care about, that shape me. So I try not to get too caught up in it." The host, who had been steering the conversation with sharp jabs, seemed to soften. It was clear now that Keanu was not the kind of person to play along with petty banter. Instead, he had brought a level of introspection and self-awareness that few other guests on the show had ever demonstrated. The energy in the room shifted from one of tension to one of admiration. "I think that's why people love you, Keanu," the host said, finally acknowledging the sincerity of Keanu's words. "You're not just another celebrity talking about their career, you're real. And that's something people can really relate to." Keanu smiled, but it wasn't a smile that was full of bravado or self-satisfaction. It was a humble, quiet smile, one that seemed to say, "I'm just being myself." "Thank you," Keanu replied, nodding slowly. "But I think what's most important is realizing that we're all just human. We all have our struggles, our journeys, and the more we can connect with each other on that level, the better off we all are. It's not about being perfect, it's about trying to be a good person." The audience, once uncertain about the direction of the interview, now erupted into applause. Keanu had shifted the energy in the room, taking a moment that could have easily become uncomfortable or awkward, and turning it into a profound conversation about kindness, humility, and authenticity. The host, visibly moved, joined in the applause, nodding with appreciation for the actor's thoughtful words. "I think we've just learned a lot from you tonight, Keanu," the host said. his tone now filled with genuine respect. "Thank you for sharing that with us. It's not often we get such a raw, honest moment on the show." Keanu nodded, his smile widening ever so slightly. "It's the least I can do," he said softly. "If we all just tried to be a little kinder, little more patient with each other, I think we'd be in a much better place." As the applause settled, Keanu gave a final nod to the audience, signaling that his time on the show was coming to a close. The host, now genuinely humbled by the interaction, stood up to thank Keanu for his honesty and presence. The episode quickly became one of the most talked-about interviews in late-night talk show history. Keanu had done something that most celebrities shy away from. He had shown vulnerability, humility, and a deep understanding of what truly matters in life. The conversation wasn't just about his career or his fame. It was about the kind of person he was and the values he chose to live by. For Keanu, it was another reminder that no matter how high the stakes, true fulfillment comes from being real, being kind, and living a life guided by love and respect for others. As he left the stage, it was clear that the audience had just experienced something rare, a moment of genuine insight from a man who, despite his fame, had remained grounded in what truly matters, and that in itself was the most valuable lesson of all. The studio, once filled with the usual late-night banter, was now charged with a different kind of energy. Keanu's words had cut through the usual fluff of talk show conversation, leaving the audience in a state of reflection. The host, once on the attack, now found himself on the receiving end of a lesson in humility, and it was clear that Keanu's perspective had changed the dynamic of the entire conversation. The host, visibly subdued, adjusted his microphone and gave Keanu a thoughtful, "You're right, Keanu," he said, his voice softer now. "It's easy to forget that in the hustle of life, sometimes we miss the bigger picture. We're so focused on success, status, and the next big thing that we forget the value of simply being good to others." Keanu nodded in acknowledgement, his calm demeanor never faltering. "It's all about balance," he said. "Yes, we all work hard. We all chase after our dreams. But it's important to remember that no matter how much we achieve, we're all still part of a bigger world. It's how we treat people, how we show up for the ones we love, and how we make the world a better place that really matters." The audience, sensing the shift in tone, began to clap once more. The applause was quieter than before, but filled with a deep respect for the message Keanu had just conveyed. It was a rare moment on a late-night show, rare because it transcended the usual small talk and celebrity gossip, and instead, it had become a moment of genuine human connection. The host, clearly moved, paused for a moment before continuing. "I think that's something we all need to hear more often," he said. "Thank you for bringing that to us tonight. It's not every day we have a guest who reminds us about the importance of kindness and humility." Keanu smiled once again, his humility shining through. "It's my pleasure. I think we all have the potential to make a difference even in small ways. And sometimes just listening to someone, showing them that you care, that's enough to change their world." The host gave a small, appreciative laugh. "Well, Keanu, you've certainly changed my perspective tonight. I came into this interview thinking it was going to be all about your career, but instead, it's been a lesson in life. Thank you for being so open, for sharing what really matters." Keanu shrugged modestly. "It's the least I can do. Life's too short to focus on the superficial stuff. I try to live authentically, and I think if everyone did the same, the world would be a much kinder place." The host, with a final, grateful smile, turned to the audience. "I think we can all agree. Keanu has given us a lot to think about tonight. Let's give him a big round of applause for not just being a great actor, but for being a great human being." As the applause echoed throughout the studio, Keanu stood up, nodding politely at the host and waving to the audience. The usual fanfare of the show had shifted. What had begun as a typical interview had evolved into a moment of introspection, and for Keanu, that was perhaps the most rewarding part. As he made his way off stage, the host sat back in his chair, still processing the conversation. He had asked Keanu about his success, his fame, and his role in the entertainment industry, expecting typical Hollywood responses. What he got instead was a powerful reminder of what really mattered: compassion, humility, and the ability to stay grounded no matter how far you've come. In that moment, the host realized that the world needed more of what Keanu had just shared, more conversations about kindness and less about the race for success. And for the audience, that night was no longer about Keanu Reeves, the movie star. It was about Keanu, the person, with a message that would linger long after the show had ended. Keanu Reeves had once again shown the world that despite his fame and success, he remained grounded in the values that truly mattered. And for those lucky enough to witness the interview, it was a reminder that in a world full of noise, the simplest truths are often the most powerful. Keanu Reeves confronts a rude talk show host. His response leaves the audience speechless. It was another usual night on The Late Show, where celebrities usually spar with hosts in good-natured banter, share a few laughs, and promote their latest projects. But that night, the atmosphere was different. The guest for the evening was none other than Keanu Reeves, the humble, beloved actor known for his roles in The Matrix, John Wick, and countless other iconic films. Keanu had always been a private figure, known for keeping his personal life out of the public eye, and for being refreshingly down-to-earth despite his massive fame. The host, known for his sharp tongue and sarcasm, had been preparing for a fun and lighthearted conversation, but Keanu was about to turn the tables in a way no one expected. The interview began like any other. The audience was laughing, and the host was firing off jokes, trying to get Keanu to crack a smile. Keanu, with his typical calm demeanor, handled the playful remarks with ease, offering a few words about his career and his upcoming projects. But as the conversation progressed, the host pushed further than he should have, trying to get a reaction from Keanu that he was known for provoking. "Keanu," the host began, leaning forward with a mischievous grin. "We all know you're the humble guy, the nice guy in Hollywood. But come on, don't you secretly love the fame? You've been a star for decades. Surely you've basked in the attention a little, right?" The audience fell silent, anticipating Keanu's response. The host's comment was more than just playful banter. It was a pointed jab at Keanu's image as a humble star, trying to poke holes in the carefully crafted persona that Keanu had maintained throughout his career. But Keanu, known for his ability to remain composed in even the most intense situations, didn't flinch. Instead, he took a deep breath, paused, and said, "You know, I've never really understood the need to flaunt success. For me, it's not about fame, the money, or the recognition. It's about the work, the passion, and the people you meet along the way." The host, momentarily stunned by the sincerity in Keanu's voice, tried to press on. "But come on, Keanu. You're a millionaire. You've been in blockbuster films, and everyone knows your name. You've had the fame, you've earned it. Surely you've enjoyed that part of it." Keanu didn't waver. "I've enjoyed the opportunities I've been given, yes," he said, his voice steady. "But that doesn't mean I'm better than anyone else. I do what I do because I love it. The recognition, the fame, it's secondary. We're all human. We all have our journey, and it's about how we treat people along the way." There was a long pause. The audience, who had been unsure how to react, was now caught up in the gravity of Keanu's words. This wasn't the usual celebrity banter. This was a moment of profound insight, something far deeper than anyone had anticipated. The host, realizing his attempt to provoke Keanu wasn't working, shifted his approach, though it was clear the conversation had already taken a different turn. Okay, the host said, trying to regain his usual playful tone. "But you've got to admit being a superstar feels good. It must, right? You get to live a life of luxury, you get recognized everywhere you go. That kind of success is something everyone dreams about." Keanu nodded thoughtfully before responding. "I think it's important to understand that fame and luxury aren't what make life meaningful. What matters is the connections we make, the lives we touch, and how we treat others. I don't need to be adored by everyone, but I want to be a good person, to help others, and to make a positive difference." The host, visibly humbled by the sincerity in Keanu's response, sat back in his chair. For the first time in the interview, there was no snark, no sarcasm. The host had been expecting to get a rise out of Keanu, but instead, he found himself reflecting on his own views about fame and success. As the interview continued, Keanu spoke about the importance of living authentically, of staying grounded no matter how much success one achieves. He shared how his career had never been about the spotlight, but about the joy of telling stories, meeting new people, and making an impact in a way that felt real. The interview had taken a complete 180-degree turn. What started as an attempt to challenge Keanu's humility had become an inspiring conversation about kindness, humanity, and the value of living with purpose. The audience, who had come expecting the usual late-night humor, now found themselves moved by the actor's honesty and self-awareness. The host, who had initially tried to provoke Keanu into a dramatic exchange, had instead been the recipient of a lesson on life. "You know, Keanu," he said, his tone now much more sincere, "I've got to admit you've given me a lot to think about tonight. I've been caught up in chasing after success and recognition for so long, but it's clear that what really matters is how we treat people and how we live our lives." Keanu smiled, giving a small nod of acknowledgement. "It's easy to get caught up in the noise," he said softly, "but the most important thing is the love and respect we give to others." The show ended on a high note, with the audience giving Keanu a standing ovation. The conversation had shifted from entertainment and fame to something much deeper and more meaningful. Keanu had turned a potentially awkward moment into an opportunity to remind everyone watching that true success in life isn't measured by how much you achieve, but by how you treat others and the positive impact you make. The host, now with a newfound sense of appreciation, thanked Keanu for his honesty. "Thank you for reminding us about what truly matters. It's rare to have a guest who challenges us to think this deeply, and I'm sure everyone in this room will leave tonight reflecting on your words." Keanu gave a final nod to the audience, leaving behind a message that would resonate long after the cameras stopped rolling. In a world often consumed by fame and material success, Keanu Reeves had reminded us all of the most important thing: kindness, humility, and the connections we make with one another.